Good evening, everybody, or good day to those in the US or elsewhere. It's good evening, of course, in Europe, and I'm from Europe. Patrick here, your host for the Philosophy Film Club. Today's show is going to be on the popular film The Matrix, and oh boy, we have had quite a lot of feedback and a lot of interest in this movie, and it was really interesting movie to watch for the first time. But just a few pointers for the listeners I wanted to bring up. Those of you that might be listening on the YouTube's live stream, unfortunately, there's no chat feature on there. This is something I've yet to develop in time. I will do that eventually. For now, if you want to chat on if you want to interact with the call at all, if you use the Google Plus live stream, which is the Google Plus event, which you can find either in the Facebook event or you can find on the boards at FDR. I put all those links there, so that's the way that you can interact. We'll depending on how much our callers here today. We've got quite a full house today. We will take a look at it sporadically throughout the call, and we'll refer to some of the more interesting points and comments and questions that you might have. Anyway, we're going to get on with the show. The Matrix. Gosh, I haven't watched this film for probably about I think it was around 7 or 8 years was the last time I watched it. Didn't realize it was so long ago. And of course, it's a really old film now. I mean, it's over 50. I think it reached its 15th year last year, and so it's a very old film. And I think it was Jeff. Jeff is one of our callers who's joined us today. He posted a rather satirical comedy sketch, which was done by a comedian, where he talked about some of the more some of the grainier points about the movie and how it was a little bit sort of maybe poor, at least the funnier side of things. But one of the things he did say, talked about, was how dated it was, and in many ways it was surprisingly dated when I watched it recently again. And not just the technology in terms of obviously the phones are old and the monitors, no flat screen televisions back then in those days. In 1999 it was, I think. So yeah, it was surprisingly dated, but there were some parts about the movie which still hold some of the great cinematic aspects of the way the film was shot. I mean, there's very much a sort of film noir feel to some parts of it, particularly the scene preceding the red pill scene with Morpheus and Neo. Some great scenes there which reminded me of Blade Runner, particularly with the rain pouring down, and the great scene of the circular staircase as the camera pans away. I mean, some really quite beautiful, very beautiful, sort of beautifully shot film, I thought. Anyway, that's my basic. I did really enjoy the movie, despite some of the datedness of it. But anyway, I'm going to pass on to Adi, my co-host. As you know, Adi's calling us from Missouri in the US. Just a quick plug of her website. She has a website called reallifecoaching.com, realtimelifecoaching.com, which you can obviously access on the web. She offers a free life coaching service there, and I say free, I mean obviously it's not free, but she would like some money, of course, but it's an opportunity to explore that. Anyway, Adi, I'm going to pass it on to you. What were your general feeling about watching the movie? And I know we've talked about it a lot, but I'm curious to the listeners here as well.
Yeah, although we talked about it a lot, there's still a lot to be said about a movie like this, Pat. So I first saw The Matrix when I was I was actually 24 back in 2000, and I watched it at least 4 or 5 times since then. I think that what makes this movie one of the most important classics is the fact that it marked the moment when the idea of distrust for authority and artificial systems when that idea finally broke into the mainstream. So the beauty of The Matrix is that, in my opinion, it puts together all these philosophical bits and pieces that existed long before 1999. And it serves the viewer, the proverbial red pill, with a side of easily digestible gunfights and kung fu and, unfortunately, also mysticism. So The way that the movie was conceived is also very interesting. It allows the viewer to easily assimilate what otherwise would be some really tough philosophical understandings. It's easy to notice that the Matrix, in my opinion, is split right in the middle. So in the first half, we get our big dose of philosophy, and there's very little action, if you noticed. And although the movie in the first half does manage to transmit a sense of urgency and danger, it is the second half when the viewer gets what usually the viewer likes to see, which is destruction, violence, extremely well choreographed fights, of course explosions, and lots of cool guns. So the first half engages the viewer mentally, while the second stimulates him emotionally and visually, playing into the appetite for destruction and violence of the common movie theater popcorn eater. So the core message of this movie is to make you challenge and reject a parasitic system, while the spectacular scenes of violence make these ideas more easily digestible. The Matrix, the way I see The Matrix, is a movie that marked the beginning of the paradigm shift, in the middle of which we are today, 16 years later. So this paradigm shift woken up millions in the meantime, and was indeed facilitated by the development of technology and, of course, the internet. Now, the Wachowski brothers were among the first to see a global awakening coming. They were the pioneers that led the wave of revolutionary thought that today has fully penetrated into the mainstream and has gotten so many people to, at least acknowledge the faulty system under which they live. And as Morpheus said, we never free a mind once it reaches a certain age. It's dangerous. The mind has trouble letting go. I would say that to truly awaken is not to take just one pill and pull the plugs that are connecting you to the system in, one fell swoop. If this was possible, I think that the individual would go insane. There are countless of red pills that one has to swallow before he can break free of culture and take his mind back. The Matrix is one of these pills, and dare I say it, it was the first pill that reached the mainstream and planted a splinter into the minds of the masses. I can say with certainty that The Matrix was one of the first in my long series of red pills, but I was curious to hear how this movie impacted other people, the first time they saw it, and of course, today, more than a decade and a half later. I know Ruben has had some thoughts along these lines, and he wanted to talk about Matrix's groundbreaking ideas. Take it away, Ruben.
Okay, thank you, Adi. Yeah, that's a really. I really have nothing to add. This is a perfect intro. As we discussed earlier, I think The Matrix is a really staggering and wonderful movie. I just watched it again a couple of days ago. It has to be said, it's becoming a bit outdated, and I've watched it so many times now that it's becoming a little greenish and oldish. But still, I can remember quite vividly when I saw it for the first time. I was actually overseas for the first time in my life. I'm from the Netherlands, and I just been learning how to code, and made a career switch. And I was being sent overseas to Canada to go and code there for a couple of months. So I was living in downtown Montreal, which is an amazing and big city for me as an old European. And the whole atmosphere kind of connected to me quite strongly, because I was working in a cubicle, just like Neo, which I'd never seen before in my whole life. And so when I watched this movie there in Montreal, it was really stunning. It was I even went back a couple of days later to see it again, and it connected so much to me emotionally that first time seeing it. I even remember walking out of the theater and still having those images of Neo in those final scenes of the movie, where he just takes off into the sky like some Greek god, and I had
Yeah,
the same
it is a
sense of
movie that sticks with you, isn't it?
right,
Mm.
and I had that same sense of dissociation, which he kind of has around himself the whole movie long. It's this extreme dissociation, which is being elevated to some kind of heroism. It was extremely powerful, and well, I still have those feelings towards this movie. So as an
Right.
intro, I guess that's my first take on the movie.
Yeah, thanks, Ruben. Yeah, it's funny. I one of my first thoughts when we were thinking about doing this film for discussion was remembering exactly how I saw the film. And I was with my brother, and I remember staying up till the early hours of the morning discussing it. It was like we didn't really know what we were discussing. We just felt that we'd watched something that had, a very deep-seated effect on us. Yeah, it's a great point.
Right.
Anyway, I'm going to introduce Jeff. Jeff is from Chicago in Illinois. Just a little pimp for Jeff. He's a co-producer on a Kickstarter film called Escape the Dark. So if you want to take a look at that, go to Kickstarter and just search for Escape the Dark. It's a movie that he's co-producing with a team of people there. Anyway, Jeff, what were your thoughts on The Matrix? I know you had a few, but what was your general feeling about the movie again?
Sure. Yeah. Thank you, Pat. Well, I first saw the movie when I was 14. I saw it in theaters, and it's actually it's kind of funny. I have a lot of the same feelings now for it that I did back then. Although all of the metaphors, the Christ metaphors, and the anti-state rhetoric, that was completely lost on me until just a few years ago, actually. I remember having a conversation with some coworkers of mine. I think it was around 2009, and they were asking about, well, what are some of the metaphors in the Matrix? And it finally dawned on me. It's like, oh, you can feel it when you go to work, when you go to church, when you pay your taxes. Now I understand what they were talking about.
Right.
Right. But the sort of so there is it's a very visually compelling film. There's a lot of interesting stuff in there to talk about. Viscerally, though, my reaction was just about the same, in that I thought the film was unevenly paced. Adi mentioned that the first half of it engages you intellectually, the second half viscerally, with action, gunfights, as the Nostalgia Critic put it in that video that I reposted there, shell case porn. As you see the shell cases hitting the rail of the chopper and the floor in the super slow motion. Now, some people don't have a problem with that, but for me, it just doesn't work. It's just my own subjectivity. I like things to be evenly paced when I watch a film. But all that said, yeah, like I said, there is certainly a lot to talk about in there. It's a very, very interesting film. I never pass up the chance to watch it again. Especially I just absolutely love that shot of the helicopter crashing into the building and exploding, and then from the point of view of inside the opposite building, you see Trinity swinging away from the explosion, and then her body spiders the window as she crashes into it. I love that shot.
Yeah, very well done, wasn't it? There were some really good, well-produced scenes visually. Very, very well put together, I thought. Anyway, Adi, I'll leave it to you.
Yeah, so let's just move forward to our next caller and see what he thought about the movie. How about Robin? Robin is reaching us from Switzerland, and if I'm not mistaken, Robin is not new to the show. You were part of the Hangout, Dead Poets Society. Am I wrong, Robin?
Yeah, no, you're right. I was here at the Dead Poets
Well,
Society
very
Hangout.
glad to have you back. So what did you think about The Matrix? When did you see it first, and what were your thoughts back then, and how do you see it now?
Wow. Well, when I saw it first, I mean, that was in my teenage years, and I actually don't really remember it that much like the first viewing. I remember it was the first like English VHS tape that I ever got, so I watched it like over and over again just because I really liked the movie. And I think, I mean, first it really connected with me the ideas of the Matrix kind of in the dream world sense because I was big into mysticism back then. So I think that was the thing I really liked about it back then, and also the whole like action and special effects stuff. But like yeah, over the years, I think my perspective has a bit changed on the movie, of course. And yeah, I also found it very interesting to just watch it last week again, and now I still have new ideas about the ideas behind the movie and stuff. But just overall, I'm still so like fascinated and like by how well it's done, like especially like the camera, the angles they choose, and how like even like such a simple thing as a dialogue between Neo and Morpheus, how they like put the camera sometimes like to reflect off the glasses instead of like having the direct shot and all that stuff. And I tried to think of other movies that do like similar good camera work, and I couldn't think of any of them. So
Yeah,
I'm like,
and a lot of movies were inspired by The Matrix. If you only look at, we did The Giver not too long ago. There's the scene where they sit on two chairs, and the giver is giving the giver is giving the boy the wisdom and the memories. It's pretty much the shot of The Matrix of the two chairs of Morpheus and Neo, and there are many scenes that other movies actually borrowed from The Matrix. It inspired a lot of movie producers, and it has left quite a mark on the movie
It's a great point,
sphere
Haley.
as a whole.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and also like I don't know, like the whole like what like the textures they use, like for like the marble pillars and how they crash, or how Jeff mentioned like the helicopter scene, like yeah, all that stuff. Still, I think it's still top notch actually, even 15 years afterwards. Yeah,
Yeah, it
I had a
is.
blast watching it again and like thinking about the ideas again and coming to new conclusions. So yeah, I still really love the movie and the series as a whole.
Great, great. Okay, we've got Matthew. Matthew is joining us from Washington, D.C. Hi, Matthew. And just want to pimp his little blog. And he has a blog and a Facebook group called Unraise. That's UNRAISE. Unraise.com is the website, but there's also a Facebook group as well with the same name. Yeah, hi Matthew. What were your initial thoughts about watching the movie, like say the first time, but also this time around as well?
Sure. Thanks for having me. And I have a lot to say. I typed up maybe 6 pages of notes just because I was so into this movie. I watched it for the first time also when I was a teenager. I'm 26 now, so maybe on the younger side. And I also watched it with my brother, and didn't see it in theaters, but we owned the DVD, and I watched it several times. The first time I saw it, I just remember being blown away at how cool the characters were, and the plot, the fact that it was really an intellectual movie and not just, it had all this action packed into it, as Eddie mentioned at the end of it, but the majority of it is really packed with some great intellectual material. You just feel like it's causing you to challenge your own assumptions and to think deeply and richly. Now, the more recent times, I watched it twice this past week. The first time I saw it was kind of similar to that in that original experience. I was still very caught up in the movie and the action, the plot. And then the second time I would say, was very different. And I would say I'm much more critical of the movie now. Partly I think some of the dry acting, the emotional distance that was mentioned before, this kind of dissociation, and so I actually, formed some new theories on what the Matrix could mean in the course of this past week, which we can discuss later. But yeah, I think it's a really monumental mainstream movie, right? And the cinematography, again, is top-notch for its time.
Yeah.
Yeah, Matt, we messaged back and forth with all our callers, and some of the points that you want to raise seem very, very interesting. I can't wait to get to them and to talk a little bit more in depth about some of the ideas that I know you want to put forward. But let's move to Justin. Justin reaches us today from Montana, and he also has a YouTube channel which he recently started. So it's quite a new baby for him. You can find it at Sagiquarian, as in SAGIQUARION, Sagiquarian on YouTube.com, of course. So Justin, you've been part of the call before. You're also what we are starting to call a veteran of the Philosophy Film Club. And
are you trying to say I talk too much?
Oh no, just
Never.
never. We'll see. We shall see in this call.
All right.
But yeah, what did you think about the Matrix?
First I want to say that your intro and summary about the movie was fantastic, and I didn't really. I do now, but the delineation between the philosophical beginning and then the transition in the middle to the bullet porn, as Jeff called it,
to the crash boom bang.
The second half was fantastic. So I didn't ever thought of it that way, but you're definitely right. And when I first saw it, I was 19. We saw it in the theater with my friends, and I just my jaw hit the floor because, especially the scenes where Morpheus and Neo were first meeting, because most of my life. My teenage life, I always felt like something was wrong with the world, and I could never really vocalize it. So here was this guy on this huge screen, talking about, a splinter in your mind, there's something wrong with the world, and I'm like, wow.
Hey, I was just curious, Justin. After I saw the movie the first time when I was younger, not as young as you, of course, it left me with a feeling that I was enlightened. I just didn't know what I was enlightened about, and it was.
Me too, and I remember getting up on soapboxes and be like, "There's something wrong with the world," blah, 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 because
I
saw this movie.
don't know what exactly is wrong with the
Right,
world.
exactly, yeah. And I know the one line I made a note that Morpheus says to Neo. I'll just read it real quick. What you know you cannot explain, but you feel it. You felt it your entire life, that there's something wrong with the world. You don't know what it is, but it's there, like a splinter in your mind driving you mad. That still hits me with the same impact today as it did then. I watched the movie, and I was just thinking it would have like a kind of a muted impact because I'm older, a little more wiser, arguably speaking. And it hit me just as hard. I'm like, yeah,
Yeah, I can identify with that. I had that splinter all my life. I just didn't know what the splinter was about until somehow recently. But yeah, it engaged me emotionally very much.
Oh yeah.
And back then, not a lot mentally. So.
Yeah, and of course, all the philosophical and historical content and all that stuff was lost on me. But the only thing I got was the mythological and theological references because I was very anti-religion at the time and whatnot. But this movie was a good intro to finding out what that splinter in my mind was. It was excellent.
Yeah. And it's interesting. I definitely share the jaw-dropping experience, and I also share the experience of not really understanding what I was supposedly enlightened about.
Right. It's like, I know there's something really important here, and I'm not sure what it is, but I like all those bullets flying by.
Yeah, I wish, because me and my brother, we literally did talk about the movie all night. I think I was 30 or coming up to 30 at the time. Actually, no, I was over 30. I was 30 at the time when I watched it, and so I was much older. I wasn't normally prone to being sucked in by a movie, but this one really had quite the impact. But yes, it wasn't for years later, really, that it had that it made sense, you know, and I think we'll obviously talk about some of those reasons for that as we go along. But I mean, one of the things that I wanted to sort of, I'm going to sort of talk a little bit about a little bit more about how I felt about the movie in general, particularly watching it again, and also having listened to a lot of other people that have, because there's mountains of stuff out there on the internet and television series, all sorts of things that have been written and said about the Matrix. It's not just us in our childlike states that were taken in by it. I think it really kind of captured the imaginations of a lot of people. And this is the interesting thing. I mean, the film, we are the Philosophy Film Club, of course, and we prefer, obviously, to think about the ideas and motives behind filmmaking in terms of philosophy, right? And this film, I think, kind of is quintessential in many senses regarding philosophy. I mean, it refers to so many philosophers, and one of the most obvious scenes, of course, is the one in the Oracle's office where she has a plaque in Latin with "Know thyself," which is, of course, a famous quote from Socrates, you know. But there's also like references to Nietzsche and Baudrillard. Baudrillard is a very actually important part of this film. Not necessarily my most favourite philosopher, because he's a bit of a postmodernist, which isn't my particular flavour of philosophy, really. But he is very much a part of this film, or certainly part of some of the aspects of this movie, particularly which might relate to some of the aspects maybe Matthew might bring up later on regarding nihilism, etc. But I'm sorry, did you want to?
Yeah, I mean, I think, no, it's just,
Yeah.
I wanted to add something to what you said, because I think
Sure.
I perceive the movie along the same lines as you do. It's an actual puzzle of a lot of bits and pieces of philosophy mashed together, you know, and just mixed with a huge dose of action. That I see this action just as the Vaseline that they use to insert these hardcore ideas into the viewer's mind, because I mean, people don't really pay for philosophy. They pay for explosions and and fights. So I think the producers wanted to give satisfaction to the viewer that would pay a ticket to see a movie, but also used that part, which is not very philosophical, the part of the super action, to facilitate the transmission of these ideas.
Right. Yes. Good point. Yeah. I think we'll perhaps because I want to go into some of the characterizations if we can. And I know Jeff has some interesting points he wanted to raise regarding that. He talks some of the submissions you've given me here are regarding Morpheus and Cyphus in particular, and the agents, and of course Neo, the main character. I was curious, Jeff, just to pick your brains, particularly in this regard. Which character was the most important, or most, let's say, most interesting, let's say, for you?
Yeah, on the whole, I think it is the most interesting to me. Of course, anybody who's seen the Hangout page, the very first thing that I mentioned on there, one of the problems I always had was that the protagonists of the movie are consistently, unless I miss something here, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, but from what I've always observed, they're consistently the first to use deadly force, which gives them the ethical disadvantage for the entire conflict. Does anybody have any other thoughts on that?
That's a good point. Sorry, did you want to say something in particular?
Yeah, I especially wanted to ask Jeff. He mentioned the fact that as far as characters go, Neo is not necessarily looking for Morpheus, which is a hero. He's not looking for a hero, but for an answer, for truth, for enlightenment, and for virtue. Would you like to talk about that a little bit more in detail? Because I might have something to add on that on that idea.
Sure.
But
Yeah.
I want to make sure that I understand where you're coming from.
Right. Yeah, I can talk a little bit to that. It was just something I noticed in the club scene early in the movie when he meets Trinity for the first time, that she mentions to him, "I know you're not looking for him," referring to Morpheus, but for an answer. And so that clicked with me. Okay, yes, he's on the hunt for enlightenment and for virtue and truth, and not necessarily for a hero. Of course, one of the consistency problems that comes up with this is that Neo himself becomes the hero, so that kind of waters down that concept a little bit.
I agree.
I mean, he is on the hunt for truth and for enlightenment, but is he really not looking for a hero? Is he really looking for the truth? Because, I mean, maybe it's just my take on it. Neo is actually looking for a hero that can provide him with an answer. He is not really looking to find the truth himself by his own means, but he's looking just for someone to tell him the truth. And this idea that we cannot find truth on our own and that we have to wait for someone to tell us what the truth is and to save us, and obviously hope that we are the chosen one, it really bothered me during the movie. Not the first time I saw it, but actually yesterday when I watched it last time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a good point. One of the things I think you're right in that sense is even Morpheus is looking for a hero, right? In a sense, they're looking for heroes in each other. So there's a kind of sense that Neo or Tom, is looking for he sort of sees a heroic figure in Morpheus, and Morpheus is looking for this heroic figure in Neo.
Yeah, they're all looking for a savior.
Yeah.
So Neo's savior is Morpheus, Morpheus' savior is Neo, and Neo has to save everybody. This is, again, the religious approach
I agree.
Having a savior, and the savior has to be the chosen one. It's something to do with nature and with genes, not with your abilities, and with one's capacity to actually find truth through his own means, through his own reasoning skills. So it's not very empowering just from that point of view.
Yeah, certainly there was a lack of consistency there in terms of, although you could argue in a sense Neo was in a sense looking for truth in a more broader sense, but he was easily swayed by the heroic, so yeah, good point.
Right. Well, just to play devil's advocate here, couldn't you also look at it as people looking for help just from other enlightened human beings?
True. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah,
yes, there is
looking
that
for
sense.
a way out of a system that they feel discomforted by or something like. Because that's what really appealed to me about the movie itself was, at that time in my life I was trying to find a way out of whatever it was I was feeling about the world at the time. So. Yeah, and Jeff, can I ask you something about the? Can you expand a little bit more about the protagonist kind of taking the moral low ground with the more aggressive actions? Because I know what you mean, but when taken in the broader context of the Matrix system itself, it's very slavish, And even granted, they're ignorant of the slavery, but once they're aware of it, I can kind of appreciate how their first response to this gigantic mechanoid, system that enslaves them would be kind of violent. Because how do you reason with a machine,
Right. Well, I don't really have any sympathy for the AI, for the machines, but I'm talking about the blue pill humans who are enslaved. When you have characters who can run on walls and jump 3 or 4 meters in the air minimum. They have superpowers apparently. Can't they find other ways to incapacitate threats without killing them? And actually, I don't know if anybody else noticed this. I didn't even notice it until the last time that I watched the movie. Even after Neo becomes almost totally omnipotent, and he's finally able to delete the Smith program, he still apparently kills the host, because you don't see the host being dispossessed and returned to normal function.
Yeah, I mean, when there's a certain aspect of not valuing human life, and the 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 purpose excuses the means, because Agent Smith takes over the bodies of real people, and when he kills him over and over again, what he actually does, he kills other human beings, and he doesn't really, morally speaking, he doesn't seem to have a problem with that. And I think it's justified by, hey, they're batteries anyway, so they're not really living, so if we're killing them, it's not that big of a deal. So yeah, morally speaking, the violence and the murder that occurs at the hands of Neo is pretty disturbing.
And that's what Morpheus tells Neo in the training, is that all of these people who are not unplugged are your enemies.
Yeah. I mean,
Exactly
I
what
think
I
the
was going to
quote.
say.
I have the quote here. The Matrix is a system, Neo. That system is our enemy. You have to understand, most of these people are not ready to be unplugged, and many of them are so inert, so hopelessly dependent on the system that they will fight to protect it. So they're not just fighting against machine, that they're also fighting against other human beings.
True. Yeah. Well worded. That's exactly the point I was just formulating in my mind. Matt just beat me to it. So yeah. Cool. Thanks for bringing it up.
So does anybody else have a problem with the moral aspect of the violence?
I hadn't really thought about that whole aspect yet. It's a great point, and I was thinking out, because in preparation for this call, I also read about one aspect of the movie, is that it is being linked to the Columbine murders, and that the extreme violence in this movie, because there's no sense in diminishing it. It's an extremely violent movie. Is that in this sense it also had an impact on the world, so to speak? Do you have any thoughts on that, on the impact of this violence, its moral complications, and the effect it has had on the audience?
I'm still confused about the link with the Columbine shooting.
Me too.
Do you mind extrapolating on that a little bit? Because I don't see the connection.
Well, I think there was a link to how the shooters were dressed. They had long coats. Also,
You mean the image portrayed in the movie, the trench coats, the darkness, the kind of emo with the guns and the. Okay, I get it. Okay.
This doesn't mean that I follow this line of thought. It's just.
No, it makes sense, because I had forgotten that the Columbine kids were dressed in sunglasses and dark trench coats.
Yeah, they're supposed to have had these big canvas bags stuffed with their parents' names.
Yeah.
So it's, I'm not going to tell you guys that they did it because they watched The Matrix, but
Sure.
At least in a director's cut kind of way, it must have had an impact. I don't see how it wouldn't have had.
Yeah, there's an interesting, going back to Jeff's that comedy post that he did, there was an interesting aspect he brought up in that shooting scene, particularly where they bust into that building to save Morpheus, and where he talks about just wantonly killing all these security guards, like as if there was really no consequence to it. So yeah, it's an interesting point, and I think it makes sense to some degree. As to what degree it links, it can be attributed to the Columbine is a little bit sort of a stretch, but I can certainly see the influence that the Matrix may have had on those.
Well, I think it's certainly a moral problem that this movie has, is that there's kind of an unmasked glee in going out with a bunch of guns and shoot the crap out of things.
Which kind of alludes to Matt's point. I know Matt talks quite a lot about the nihilism in this movie, which perhaps I think is a pretty interesting topic to go into now. Perhaps seems relevant. What do you think, Matthew?
Well, I would I would argue that this is really kind of a modern Bible for nihilists. And, nihilism is really, at its core, anti-philosophical. It's sophistry. It asserts that
Right.
nothing is valuable or true. And so, it's logically a contradiction. You can't claim as a truth statement, truth does not exist. So likewise, the Matrix claims implicitly that we can't trust our senses because they're merely electric impulses in our brains. But, if this is true, then I don't see how that doesn't apply to the world outside the Matrix. And so it becomes this infinite regression with turtles all the way down. And I think there's kind of a lot of holes in the nihilist argument. And one thing I was going to say about the one, which we talked a little bit about, I think the one represents meaning in kind of an existential way. And so, when you reject existence, I guess they're looking for something outside of themselves. It's this question of the meaning of life, people who are looking for the meaning of life are almost universally unhappy people, because they're told that they're told from birth practically that there's something missing in their life and they have to pursue this. And so that's why they look for meaning. And so there's constantly this search. And the nihilist argument is to say that there is no meaning. Nothing exists, which
but about your nihilism, I would like to challenge you on that, if you don't mind. Would you say that the characters in the Matrix are obsessed with with looking for the meaning of life, or not?
Well, I think so. Yeah, I think.
See, and that's where the contradiction comes into play, because nihilism is the negation that life has a meaning. And we have different forms of nihilism. We have epistemological nihilism, we have existential nihilism, moral nihilism, but especially the epistemological nihilism, I think this is pretty tricky, because it says knowledge is not possible and that reality does not actually exist. But there's a lot of purpose in the Matrix. Reality in this movie does actually exist outside of the program, and reality is what everybody is fighting for, and the meaning is what everybody's fighting for. So I would like to introduce some other philosophical concepts that might fit with the movie, since I think nihilism is not quite what this movie puts forward. So we have, for example, solipsism, which states that only one's mind exists, and the world out and other minds, they don't exist, and this can never be proven. But then we have the dualism that says that, and I think this particular philosophy fits a little bit better than nihilism with the Matrix. And dualism says that the body is a machine, while the mind is immaterial and does not follow the laws of nature. Now, Descartes, which is the father of dualism, he said that the two, the mind and the body, interact through the pineal gland. And this is extremely interesting, because the pineal gland is responsible for producing DMT, which is dimethyltryptamine, and it's a substance that the pineal gland releases, and it helps us dream. This is what causes our dreams. So I think dualism fits a little bit better with this movie. The body is a machine, the mind is immaterial and can break the laws of nature. And again, the dream aspect of the pineal gland, which is the one that connects the body and the mind, in of course, Descartes' theory.
Yeah.
I think it's more fitting than nihilism. What do you guys think?
I think you raise a good, interesting point. I think one of the biggest problem, I think we've touched a little bit on this, there is a certain amount of contradiction, there's a bit of confusion with really what the underlying message is, because they throw all these kind of philosophical concepts in the one movie. I mean, one of the things that I experienced from listening to lots of other people talking about this movie was people from mystics to philosophers of all different genres and types, etc., that all felt they had a part of the puzzle that had worked out in this particular movie. So I see aspects of nihilism in this movie, but I certainly see a lot of dualism. I think dualism is I think it is an underpinning part of this movie, in particular Descartes. But also I see deterministic aspects to it as well, which it kind of relates to nihilism as well.
Like fate, you're destined to be the one. You're, if not, we're all destined to be slaves of the machine, and all that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think, at the very least, I think Agent Smith himself as a character is nihilism incarnate. I don't think nihilism is a terribly strong thread in the movie itself, but the Agent Smith character, both before and after, in the subsequent sequels, when Neo kind of does his thing on him, he is still that persistent anti-life kind of eradicator of humanity type of persona. Every time he talks about existence, he's always doubting it. If you listen to his verbiage, he's always talking about the senses and even human emotion like it never really existed, and that it only exists now because the machines are creating what they believe or what they think the concepts are and transmitting them to the human brain. So to the machines, to this nihilistic construct, there is nothing worth existing for. He does not understand why Neo is the one or why the free humans do what they do, because to him it's pointless. There's no reason to do it. So I thought it was, the thing that hit me the hardest about what Matt was saying when Addy was going about dualism is the fact that, as a former nihilist myself, I saw a lot of myself in what the character of Agent Smith was portrayed as, because it's a destructive philosophy, if even one dare call it a philosophy.
Yeah, undoubtedly, Agent Smith does portray nihilism. It's pretty easy to see, but what I was trying to get across is that the message of the whole movie is not necessarily nihilistic.
Right. Yeah.
Although, yeah, there is a huge aspect of nihilism in the machine's approach towards the human beings, and I'm not very keen on accepting that the core message of the movie is based on dualism either. Although, a more modern approach of dualism is the brain in the vat argument. I don't know if you guys are familiar with it, which is pretty much that you do not exist. You are just a brain in a box, and you're plugged into a computer who transmits signals to your brain and creates your reality. And there's no way of proving or disproving the argument. It's about 50-50. But, I'm going to bring down my own theory of dualism now, and I'm going to crash it, saying that the world in the Matrix does exist, and reality is real. It's just not the reality that the system wants you to see. It's the reality it's outside of it. So what I think is that the Matrix actually promotes realism, that the concept that reality exists independent of our senses, and that reality can be accessed once we awaken our minds to it by shedding our cultural indoctrination and the preconceived ideas that we hold. So, yeah, it's a combination. That's why I said it's a puzzle of all these philosophical pieces of nihilism, of solipsism, of dualism, and in the end, it's in my opinion, it's all about realism. Go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, no, I think you bring up some really good points, and I don't think, now that I think more about it, I don't think that the purpose of the movie or the core of it is nihilism. There is one part where the word nihilism comes up. Does anyone know what I'm talking about?
Wait, in the
Your
movie, did he
brain.
actually mention the word nihilism? Like
Well,
they brought
no. So Pat mentioned Baudrillard,
That's
the
right.
French
Yes.
philosopher,
Yeah.
and that's the book that Neo has in his room that he opens to stash his.
Oh, I didn't even notice that. Damn. Yeah, you're right.
And
Yeah.
he flips open. So the book he has is Simulacra and Simulation by John Baudrillard, which was published in 1981.
Yeah.
And he flips open this book to the section on nihilism. And I thought it was interesting that he's carved out this book,
Literally carved it out.
essentially making it hollow, essentially.
Yeah, but doesn't that
It was
mean that he
interesting.
doesn't really value the book that much? I mean, a book that he loves, he would never destroy it and use it just as a hiding place. Isn't that a message that, yeah, the machines represent nihilism, but Neo trashes this book pretty much to create the hiding place? I would never carve a book that I care about or that I hold in high esteem.
Great point.
Yeah, that could be. Well, I think it's a great book to put in this movie, and I think it has a lot of influences. The map analogy that Louis Borges tells of the empire, which created a map so detailed that it covered the entire empire, and then when the empire crumbled, all that was left was the map. And so I think that's kind of what we're seeing with the Matrix is it's this symbol of something that existed at one time, which has now crumbled away. And everyone thinks that, everyone's preoccupied with trying to get the map maker to detail out a section of their map. So yeah, Baudrillard, he's very critical of society, media, and capitalism, the typical leftist style fashion. So I just wanted to, I wanted to talk about that book in regards to the philosophy of.
Yeah, actually, that was one of the books that the Wachowski brothers asked all the lead actors to read before starting shooting the movie. It was required that the actors read that particular book, together with Out of Control by Kevin Kelly and Introducing Evolutionary Psychology by Dylan Evans. So they had to brush up on their philosophy before they were even allowed to act in the movie.
Wow.
It was interesting that they were asked to look at the most postmodern stuff, which is relates obviously to some nihilism, etc. But is the most confusing and the most probably the most complex. I mean, I have a particular dislike for it, but which probably some of you may share with me. But yeah, it was interesting that they chose those particular things to discuss. Although evolutionary biology, I'm not too unkeen on that particular aspect, but certainly Baudrillard, he does kind of go into the realms of kind of fantastical almost. Certainly when I read that book at art school, I remember reading particularly about Baudrillard because I was very interested in philosophy and I wanted to sort of get a take on modern philosophy, and Baudrillard is probably the most modern of philosophers that exists, although I guess there are others like Peter Singer and stuff, but he's probably the most influential, I think, on the current culture, in many ways.
So yeah, I guess we pretty much dissected nihilism and all the other
Sure.
aspects of this part of the movie. Do you mind?
Not that it mattered anyway.
Okay, nihilistic Justin. There you go. So, yeah, cool comment. Now, I know Robin noticed a false dichotomy that the movie puts forward, and do you want to talk a little bit more about that? I don't want to give all your points away before you.
Yeah,
You think?
sure. Actually, I think I kind of changed it a little in the last few days. I think I was wrong in my first assessment, but overall, just I don't think the movie really promotes any sense of like true freedom or like a journey to truth, but that it's more like a trap in and of itself to like get people from one system of control to kind of another. The reason being that like I mean Morpheus and the whole gang like of the well people who live in Zion or who have been freed. I mean they're extremely mystical and I mean, very kind of irrational in their beliefs, and I mean, they promote like blind faith, and I think Morpheus even says to Neo, like, I mean, like I think it was in that jump scene that like he has to, oh, I have to quote somewhere, but like he has to let go of doubt and everything, and I mean, that's not really the way to go if you're looking for something of substance, that you just like kind of take everything in uncritically and then just accept it at face value. I mean, that's kind of the exact opposite. So in a way, they do kind of a similar thing that like the Matrix. In the Matrix, the machines use like their physical constraints to manipulate the mind, and they kind of try to manipulate the minds of. And then the people like the Morpheus and all those and the Oracle, they try to manipulate the minds so that they can like basically move the bodies of the humans on their own accord, so to speak. So yeah, sorry, you wanna add
Yeah, no,
something?
I was about to totally agree with you. The movie is full of mysticism as well as philosophical arguments. So it has that duality. And the false dichotomy that you sensed, I think you were talking about only two options, either the cold rational machines or the
Yeah,
the believers, the faith,
yeah,
the ones that
Great point.
embrace the faith, and there's no middle. There's no well-balanced, rational human being that can be intelligent and rational and can also be connected with his emotions. So just a quick recap of all the puzzle pieces that Matrix puts forward as mysticism. We have Greek mythology. Morpheus, the name Morpheus was the name of the god of dreams. And interestingly enough, he was the dream messenger of gods that communicated divine messages through images and stories that he created as dreams. And this is what he's pretty much doing to Neo. Morpheus appears in his dream state within the Matrix, and he wakes him up. Interestingly enough, Morpheus also appears in a poem of Ovid entitled Metamorphosis. So Neo is undergoing a huge metamorphosis in the movie. So then we have another mystical aspect actually is Zion. This is the place where the humans have retreated. And we know Zion, in the Kabbalah, which is the esoteric school of thought that originated in Judaism. Zion is the spiritual point from which reality emerges. So there's a lot of mysticism there. Also, the name of the ship, I'm not sure if I'm going to pronounce this right, so bear with me, is Nebuchadnezzar.
Nebuchadnezzar, yeah, you got it.
Yeah, okay, thank God. Thank
Tough
the
one,
God of
that.
atheists. So, yeah, it was a king of Babylon who built the gardens of Babylon and destroyed the temple of Jerusalem. It's mentioned in the Bible several times, and actually the translation of the name, which is extremely interesting, it means, "O God Nabu," which is the god of wisdom, "O God Nabu, defend my firstborn son." So there it is again, the son and the savior. And then we have Trinity, and I don't need to talk about the Christian
That one's
doctrine.
pretty obvious.
Yeah, that was pretty obvious. So yeah, the movie is filled, like it's interspaced with hardcore philosophy and flaky mysticism, and that's what I think. That's what back then, when I was 24, and I wasn't really religious, but I was still somehow a mystic. That's what resonated with me emotionally, and this is why I couldn't engage mentally fully when I saw the movie the first time. But what do you guys think about it?
Yeah, with the mysticism point that Robin first brought up, and you just touched upon, Addie, that I was a mystic, very heavily so in my late teens, early 20s. Right in the middle when I saw this movie, and I recall one of the things that hit me was there's a big track in mysticism about the holographic universe. I'm not saying it's wrong or right. We just don't know, but and this is not the show for it, but I know that the quote light-sider woo-woo world went batshit crazy about this model of the Matrix, and they kept saying the Matrix, go watch the Matrix, instead of explaining their point and making their arguments, they would just started saying, go watch the Matrix, and that'll explain everything. It's like, well, no. But then eventually, a few years later, as the mystics kind of wore that out, they're like, I'm not trying to make a direct correlation with the movie The Matrix, but the world itself is like this Matrix. We're not really sure what's real. Like, it became a real strong point, and I know one author, I think David Icke was his name, he really hammered that point home in the mystic
Talking
world
about
too.
mysticism.
Yeah.
David Icke.
Exactly. Yeah. So it really, I mean, if you were a mystic, that movie just would have been like jaw-droppingly awesome for you at that point, which it was for me on the mysticism side. But
Yeah, and you mentioned also something about Trinity giving birth to the new, how did you put it? Trinity giving birth to the digital deity called Neo.
Yeah, because she's the one that led him. She was the one that has been watching him. She was like his kind of caretaker, not really caretaker, but like kind of watcher in the Matrix, and she was his introduction into this world where he is going to become a god. So without her, she kind of gave birth to him as Neo, the digital Superman, basically.
Yeah, which by the way, Neo actually is comes from ancient Greek, and it means new and modified. This is why we have neo-colonialism, neoclassicism, neoconservatism, or neocon that we are more familiar with. So
Right.
Neo is the new and modified one. Even the name is important here, I think.
Yeah, and the character Neo, which this isn't clear until the version 2 and version 3 of the movie, Neo the character is just like the newest construct of the one program, so to speak. They call it, this machines call it the one program. And I know the architect in the second movie would always go on and on about how there's more nihilism here. There's always about, there's always the one, he's failed. It's just this Neo, Mr. Anderson is the latest iteration, don't pay any attention to him and his Superman antics. So, yeah.
Yeah, I know Matt also had a few thoughts about the mysticism of the Matrix.
Absolutely, yeah. I think there's a lot of mythic symbolism, and the first one that comes to mind is Homer's The Odyssey. So the Odyssey is a warrior, the journey of a warrior, Odysseus, who is returning home after the Trojan War, and he has to pass through a series of initiations in order to return to his homeland. And so the first test, he has to blind the Cyclops, who is the son of Poseidon, and after that he enters the gateway into the realm of the dream. And so in the dream world, he's divested of his secular character. And it's interesting that you have this aspect of blindness where you must rely on hearing to detect the world around you. The gateway in the Matrix is the telephone, which relies on a person's hearing.
Oh, yeah.
So Neo's blind. Another point is that Neo, when he comes out, is blind, and he asks, "Why do my eyes hurt?" And Morpheus says, "Because you've never used them before."
Awesome line.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I can see the parallels now. And also, another interesting point that you also wanted to make a parallel between the Divine Comedy, maybe, and Matrix. I'm extremely curious to hear about that. That sounds like
Okay, yeah, sure. I mean, Dante, he actually referenced, or he was very familiar with the Odyssey, and um, I I think that there's a lot of parallels between uh, Inferno, Purgatory, and Paradise, and I would assert that in this case, the Matrix is hell, and the construct program is purgatory, and then the real world, particularly the city of Zion, stands for paradise.
Yeah, I can see some of the parallels with the hell, especially because if I'm not mistaken, now I have not read Dante's Divine Comedy. I tried. I speak Italian quite well, and I failed miserably. Is the way it's written. I couldn't get through it, but I read quite a bit about it. So, if I'm not mistaken, in the underworld, scenes in Dante's Divine Comedy, scenes have mirrored punishments. For example, fortune tellers have to walk with their heads on backwards without seeing ahead, or because that's what they did during their lifetimes. They were telling the future. They were trying to look ahead.
That's right.
And hypocrites are made to walk in circles with beautiful roads, but the inside is made of lead. This means, like, just to mirror their sin, the outside is beautiful, but the lead on the inside weighs on them, just as their falsity also used to weigh on them. So is it, I just want to put forward an idea. Neo is a hacker. So is maybe his punishment fighting a program, a software program, for the rest of his life? Is this one of the parallels with Dante's Divine Comedy that you also noticed?
That's not one that I came up with. That's interesting. I'd have to think about that more. Yeah, I know that hell's mentioned a couple times in the movie. One of them is Trinity says to Neo, since I am the ranking officer on the ship, if you don't like it, I believe you can go to hell, which is, interesting enough, where they're going is the Matrix. And also, when Agent Smith is interrogating Morpheus, to a lesser extent, he talks about the smell of the place. And I know in a lot of mythologies, there's this aspect of hell where you're tortured for eternity. You can't move, and there's just this wretched smell which you have to deal with, in addition to all these other fiery.
I didn't even
tortures.
know that. That's an awesome point. Yeah, and that the actor that played Agent Smith, he really hit home how disgustingly saturated he was by this human stink. To him, being around humans, having to administer the Matrix was hell for him.
Right.
He really emphasized the smell thing. You're right. That's awesome. Yeah.
And also, when he's in that same scene, he's talking about the original Matrix that was devised to be paradise, and it failed, which is kind of like the Garden of Eden.
Yeah, what do you think about that? Because a part of me kind of got pissed about that, because it's like, oh, we tried making this utopian human society, and humans are so messed up that they rejected it, and whole entire crops were lost. Crops being fields of humans. And
well, it's this idea that humans can never be happy. Which.
Or they're never satisfied with happiness. They've always got to push the limit and kind of bring in evil to, I don't know, spice things up a bit.
The thing I would say is that humans can be happy, but at the same time, we're not content. We don't.
So do you think the message is that people aren't content living in a utopia because it's kind of boring, or because it doesn't challenge enough? Because I know hardship and pain and evil and all these things kind of get lumped together sometimes, and without some of that to present challenge, there really is no growth. So maybe what the message there is, people were dying in droves because there was no challenge, there was no growth, there was nothing to keep their minds occupied. And I wonder if that's what the reference was to. I just remember it kind of bothered me that, because I used to be like I said, this mystic guy that was like, why can't we just have a utopia where nobody gets sick, and here's this Captain Nihilism on screen with these hot sunglasses saying, well, we tried that and everyone died in droves.
Right.
Well, I think that it's pretty clear when Agent Smith says that we are a virus upon the world, and that
I hate that
we
analogy.
spread and then we destroy everything around us. So it's
Yeah.
he promotes the idea that humans are moved and powered by destruction, and that they
Are
are
the cure.
and that they are actually the parasite. And this is such a weird argument coming from the parasite itself, which is the machine,
Right.
Agent Smith, and he's telling Morpheus that you humans, you are parasitic, you're parasitic nature. No, he didn't use the word. You're like a virus, and you flourish on destruction. So this is
Right.
why
Yeah.
I think the Matrix only works if it has a destructive
Yeah.
aspect of it. And
Yeah, he was saying, I think the line goes, humans are a disease and we are the cure.
Are the
I think
cure.
that's how he said it too, thereabouts.
yeah,
Right.
yeah. And this is also the way the state sees civilization.
Exactly.
I mean, you will, left to your own means, you will not be able to function. You will destroy everything. You have to be limited. And I know Jeff wanted to talk about agents as state metaphors, and how the machines literally trap humans in the past.
Yeah, I'd like to hear more on that, Jeff. This I think is the most interesting part. So go ahead. Yeah.
Sure, yeah. Actually, I'd like to just briefly mention earlier when we were talking about the Matrix, when it's perfect, when it's a utopia, it doesn't work because humans are challenged. It reminds me of an episode of Malcolm in the Middle where Malcolm is playing a computer game. It's similar to The Sims, and he puts his own family in as the characters and gives every one of them some kind of debilitation except for himself. He completely maxes out his qualities. And what ends up happening is all the family members work past those inherent challenges that they have. Meanwhile, his character ends up morbidly obese and drinking himself to death.
That's a good analogy. Right. Excellent.
Right. Yeah. So anyway, going back to Pat, what you mentioned about the agents being state metaphors. I mean, obviously, you have the visual motifs. They look like Secret Service agents. Also, they are the state embodied, and they literally take control of the host in order to do the really dirty work. It's kind of like if you have a neighbor who's a police officer. When he's on vacation, when he's off duty, he's probably a normal neighbor. He'll mow your lawn if you're on vacation, pick up your mail, do favors for you, and do just a normal acquaintance that you might have. But when he pulls you over and he's in uniform, he's embodied by the state, and now he's your enemy. And so I thought that was a
fantastic point. I didn't even put those two together until you just said it. I kind of feel dumb now because me and my girlfriend were just talking about this very aspect of it. These cops are just people until they put on these costumes and point guns at everyone. And we're just people trying to get along. And I just watched The Matrix and I see guys in these suits. I'm like, duh. So that's awesome. Thanks, Jeff.
Yeah, and I don't think it's a coincidence that the agents have those earpieces and they look exactly like FBI or CIA or Secret Service.
I don't doubt that at all. Yeah.
Yeah, but I see agents as like definitely state metaphors, but more specifically as the psychopaths that rule the world. Psychopaths are not quite humans. And they're very much like machines because they usually are extremely intelligent, but they lack empathy, which they are kind of a, how are they called? Not a subspecies, but somehow different than humans.
An interspecies predator.
Interspecies predator, thank you, exactly. I see them more specifically, not necessarily just as embodiment, they embody the state, but mostly they embody the psychopaths that rule our world and that have risen to positions of power and turned us all into batteries.
Yeah,
that's pretty much what we are.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point. Yeah, and I think the one scene that sticks in my head and kind of curious which scene kind of embodies this for you guys, but the scene that embodies what Addie was saying for me visually is the scene where towards the end where the agents are kind of shifting. They're not chasing after Neo in a helicopter or on foot. They're shifting from person to person. And then the one person they shift into is this mother holding grocery bags with her daughter's hand, and the agent just shifts. The daughter looks up in shock, lets go of the hand, and grabs the gun and starts shooting at Neo. It's just like 1 second, here's this mother and daughter just going out and getting groceries. Next moment, agent of the state erases the mother from existence.
Yes, but isn't that the truth? I mean, have you ever tried?
Yeah,
and
it's
fantastic.
I want to reach in there and choke the shit out of that guy.
Have you ever tried to speak to the common man and woman against the state? I mean, they turn. They literally turn into state agents. And they attack you.
Yeah, yeah.
So.
That
yeah. Go ahead.
I'll just at my last job, we were out to dinner one time. I don't work there anymore, and we were out to dinner, and they started a political discussion. I tried to stay out of it as much as I could, but eventually I couldn't take it anymore. And when somebody mentioned, I never vote this way or that way, I said I don't vote at all. And everybody, man, the tidal wave just came roaring at me. But I fought back. I used some George Carlin on them, and
yeah. Yeah, and just to reinforce your point, when you said that the machines are like the state and they trap humans in the past, because of course that's what the state does. It stalls evolution, be it technological, moral, or from any other point of view. It prevents humans from evolving. They also believe, as Agent Smith believes, the state believes that the world has to have misery and violence in order to function properly and for the citizens to be happy. Because
we're the ones that create the misery and the violence.
Yeah, right. Because we're going to have this war so our citizens can lead a happy and fulfilled life, and we're going to have this other thing, and they just destroy and bring misery with good intentions.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. You see this in Babylon 5 too. The shadow aliens. They deliberately instigate conflicts among the other races.
By the way.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. If I had the time, I'd watch it again.
Find the time, Jeff. Find the time.
Yeah, there was one. Sorry, Jeff. You wanted to carry on?
Oh yeah, just clarify a little bit more. The shadow aliens, they deliberately instigate conflicts among the younger races in an effort to get them to grow, because in their view it won't happen any other way. It's through extremely violent conflict that the greatest advances happen.
Yeah, and if we're going to move on to another subject quick, I just want to touch upon the state thing and the agents as a representation thereof, because it's really kind of gets me riled up, because like in the movie, people are just resource nodes, to be tapped and literally flushed down the tube when they're too old to be of value anymore, along with the embiotic fluid that keeps their bodies alive. And the state is the same way currently. It allows us free movement only to the degree that we are getting jobs 8 to 5, 9 to 5, whatever it is, and then they get to kind of siphon off some of that productivity, and then we're just kind of flushed away, as far as the state is concerned, willy-nilly, as if we get too old or we get too rowdy or we break too many rules or we say something to the wrong agent, so to speak. It's the analogy there is so clear to me, at least.
It was something I wanted to sort of. There was something very Orwellian about the whole process of the with the agents. I mean, particularly the fact when he was being interviewed, when he was initially arrested at the very beginning of the film, where they have this file on this table. It just reminds me of this kind of
it's thing. Like 6 inches thick.
Yeah, it's like I mean, it's kind of weird that it's a file, like it's bits of paper, because it's all digital, right? But it sort of reminded me of the kind of Edward Snowden world that we've kind of been brought into, where the state has all this information about us in terms of the internet and stuff like that. And of course, they could analyze our interests and our daily habits to some degree through our use of the internet and stuff, probably. And there was definitely that side to it. It was a sort of because they were inside the Matrix, it was almost like being inside the minds of people, because the Matrix was a kind of the mind place for people. Of course, they were realistically in these vats, right? Which there's that very very clear, yeah. There's that very clear, the very powerful scene where you suddenly see all these droves of bodies in this battery thing, and it's a very clear analogy about what the obviously, you know, between taxation and, you know, or fuel, or whatever they want to call it. Fuel can be taxation. I mean, the metaphor is there, of course.
Right.
Quite clear.
Do you remember what Agent Smith said to Neo before he became, you know, when he was still, because Agent Smith has a penchant for calling Neo Mr. Anderson, you know, throughout the entire trilogy.
Right. Yeah.
And do you remember like the speech he was giving about, you know, in one life you were a respected software programmer for, you know, this company, and another life, kind of switching to a disdainful tone, you're a computer hacker, go by the alias Neo. One of these lives has a future, the other does not. You know, and it's like, you can only be a resource node for us to tap and then die. Then nothing else is morally acceptable. you know?
Yeah, and another interesting thing about that scene, which clicked for me, was, you know, when Neo says pretty much, "Fuck you, I want my phone call." The agent says,
the finger.
"Yeah, what good is a phone call if you're unable to speak?" And then he makes Neo's mouth disappear. And I was thinking this is like a metaphor for the state taking away the freedom of speech, which usually is the liberty that goes first. Under tyranny, when tyranny is starting to unfold, and that is the first thing that Neo loses in the beginning of the movie is the freedom of speech by losing his actual mouth.
And that's actually what reminded me about 1984 with this very, very clearly. I think it's sort of, you know, in 1984, of course, they can't talk with each other. They have to talk in certain places, etc. I mean, in this world, in the Matrix, of course, you just can't do that. You can't escape. They can take away your, you know, ability to talk. They can pretty much assimilate you, or whatever they want to do. You know, it's actually far worse than 1984 in that regard. But yeah, it was a good point.
Yeah, I bet there are many politicians that would love the ability to just snap their fingers and have the mouths sewn shut.
One day, of course, they would. It's the wet dream of every politician out there.
We're certainly giving away our colours here, so that's cool. It's all good stuff.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah. But Matt wanted to bring up another theory, which I'm curious to hear. I don't know what it's about, but I'm curious to hear, Matthew, so go ahead.
All right, you're probably going to hate me because I'm going to tell you that the Matrix is not about the state.
Brah.
Oh, there's no hatred here. There's just extreme
We'll make your mouth so shut.
So, I'd like to propose that the Matrix is a representation of the past. And through this journey, the hero, Neo, has to achieve self-knowledge. And, you know, if we look from the very beginning, right, we see clues. Neo, he's given lots of choices throughout the movie.
I'm sorry. Do you mean Neo's past directly, or just the past in general?
The individual person's past.
Okay, got it.
So Neo, so Tom Anderson, he's addressing his boss in the beginning scene, and his boss basically tells him, "Obey me, or you'll be kicked to the curb."
Right. Talks to him just like a child. Okay. Yep. Got it.
Yeah, we see this choice given to Neo lots of times. He's given in the scene you were just talking about with Agent Smith, "Help us, or we'll make your life miserable." And then even with when he's in the car, they say, "We don't have time for 20 questions right now. There's only one rule: our way or the highway." And to some degree, when Morpheus gives him the choice of the red pill or the blue pill, you know, do you want to go back to your meaningless, dull life, or do you want to see how far this rabbit hole goes? And also later, the Oracle tells him that he has to choose between saving Morpheus and saving himself. So we see the history of impossible choices that probably, I would say, goes all the way back to Neo's childhood. And when we look at Morpheus and Trinity, the other two main characters, I think we kind of see this progression throughout the movie where in the beginning they are these mother and father figures. There's actually a point where Tank says, Morpheus, you're more than a leader to us, you're a father. And so I think the majority of the plot has to do with Neo learning not to project the roles of his past onto other people. And so when he wakes up, you know, into the real world, his relationships take form, and Morpheus shows him this tough love, right? I think he gives, what does he say? He says, I had to do what I do, you know, which is kind of like, this was for your good, it was for the good of the world, which isn't really giving Neo much of a choice. And Trinity also later tells him, you know, I'm the ranking officer on this ship. If you don't like it, you can go to hell. And so there's not a lot of choice. Now the turning point occurs when Neo saves Morpheus's life, which I think is akin to, I think it's kind of a fantasy, this idea that we can, if we had abusive people in our lives, you know, that we can change them. And the turning point with Trinity is the same. You see this, the scene where she's in the helicopter and she's tied to Neo, which you could see as this
umbilical cord.
Exactly, of motherhood. And then I think that the intention of the, whether consciously or unconsciously, of the producers was to reverse that from a maternal bond to a romantic bond. And then, so by the end of the movie, Neo and Morpheus are peers, and Neo and Trinity are lovers. So, you know, Freud would just have a field day with this.
Yeah, but I don't think if it was that it was reversed, because there was always a sexual element between Trinity and Neo from the very first time when they met.
That's true.
Although there's definitely the father figure, of course.
But then Trinity takes care of him when he's waking up. Right?
Yeah, I mean,
So
but she
this
wakes
kind
him up with a kiss, and you know, with a lot of sensuality is portrayed there in that scene.
No, I meant when sorry, I meant when Neo is waking up initially, when he just gets out of the Matrix. She brings him dinner.
Oh, okay. You mean she drops it off, and while he's sleeping, and then she closes the door. Cypher's standing right there because he's kind of jealous and stalky and all that stuff. Okay, I remember that. Yep.
Right. And then, so if we can jump to the final scene, then I think there's a lot that's true and simultaneously not true. The truth, I believe, is that even if our inner parts, so I see the agents as kind of the inner parts of Neo that he's rejected. The truth is that we don't have to be afraid of them. But when we vaingloriously attempt to wrestle control from them, it's a kind of death in that it's waking but without life. Now the part that I think is not true is that the love from other people, you know, this external validation will wake us up or bring us back to life, and that it can heal mortal wounds. But I think, you know, what the message should be is, you know, stand up to these inner parts of yourself and be kind patient, assertive, and then they may let you merge with them, but not to destroy them, but for the benefit from benefiting from each other's wisdom. And so, I just don't like this air of superiority that Neo has in the final scene. I think it's depressively repressive of his emotions.
Interesting point. Yeah, I got a sense that like you when you're talking about wrestling with parts, and then he kind of overcomes. But like you say, there's a kind of like you say, a superiority over them, which would seem to suggest that. Yeah, but I think it's a metaphor.
It's kind of like the little kid who wants the attention from his father, and so he, starts punching him and kicking him. But Neo, as the disinterested father, just deflects the attacks easily because he's bigger. And
right. Good point. I know other people wanted to talk about the childhood aspect of that. I mean, did anybody else want to? I think maybe it was Robin or maybe Jeff. I don't know who was talking about that. Perhaps maybe this sort of relates.
If I can, I also like in the ending scene, like the what Neo says like before he flies off, that struck me as kind of very emotionally immature when I heard it again, because it talks about like a world without rules and boundaries, without as if that were bad things. But I think that's kind of like rules seem bad if you grow up like in an abusive household where rules are just inflicted and one-sided, and they're not really rules but just like excuses for abuse. And then I think you kind of like one can kind of grow up like resenting rules as a whole and any form of like boundaries and like controls, right. Like because there's always the idea that they're inflicted, like they're not universal, but like if they actually had rules in that household, like there would be no abuse anyway. So kind of that struck me. So it seems like not like he had any sort of like personal maturity reach in the movie, but like that he just like he didn't get far in that direction.
Yeah, boundaries seem like a very important thing to have. I mean, rules, like they can be good or bad, I guess, but boundaries seem like a very, very useful thing for us as individuals, of course, to have. I think we have boundaries in our relationships and boundaries in our wider world, of course. They're a very important aspect. The idea of not having any boundaries, I know that in some senses that last bit was perhaps the boundaries thing was related more to something beyond personal boundaries. I mean, it perhaps related to kind of boundaries in which we're tied to certain cultural understandings. I think there was a sort of dichotomy in the way in that particular expression. But I certainly get what you're saying, Robin. That there's some, almost missing some of the point. I think,
Right.
Sorry,
yeah. Something else about that about his ending monologue there. He's deliberately antagonizing, agitating the machines, because he tells them exactly what he's going to do. He's issuing them a warning in advance, and then he ends it by saying, "Where we go from there is a choice I leave to you." Well, what do you think the machines are going to do? They're going to fight back, and sure enough, sure enough, in the sequels, they've upgraded the agents.
Right.
Yes, I thought that end line was not very well thought through. I've never been able to make good sense out of it, really. It's a bit of a drooping end in my opinion.
But it was a cool line before he did his Superman thing, and that was the point. I don't know.
Right, that's sure. Yeah.
Right. No, I think the ending would have been much more heavy in philosophical content if they would have specified. Because if you remember when he says, "You're afraid of change, you're afraid of us," and what appears on the screen is system failure. So if they were to specify there that no rules and no boundaries, no artificially imposed rules and boundaries, no boundaries of the system, no boundaries, no rules that the system wants to impose on us not just no rules overall, no moral rules, no no private property rules.
Right. So
So
he could have said something like no arbitrary rules or about something more
yeah,
clarific rather than just rules and boundaries, which is kind of juvenile, as like what Robin pointed out.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So that's where I think they a little bit more. If they were a little bit more specific, it would have made for a great ending. And it's a declaration of war. Like this is what
Oh,
I'm gonna do.
exactly.
I'm gonna take
Yeah.
you down, and you either give up, which the machines cannot do because that would mean suicide. You either give up or uh, we fight.
Right. I think one of the really interesting metaphors in this movie, which we haven't really talked about at all, is the red pill and the blue pill. I mean, it's something that's come up a couple of times in our previous podcasts, but and I've always been a little bit wary about talking about it because it sort of has it tends to allude to more you know, thoughts that amongst certain types of groups of people, etc. But I'm really curious to. I mean, I think the red pill, blue pill is a great analogy and it's a great metaphor in many ways. And I was curious how people feel that's kind of worked out since this movie has, since it's become a kind of a great part of the cultural zeitgeist. I'm curious what people make of that.
Sure, the red is the color of rebellion, and then blue, it's a depressant, it's alcohol, it's a tranquilizer, it's Ritalin, it's something that it's appropriately colored. It's going to put you back to sleep.
Does anybody know the impact the colors have on the brain? Because I know when I was first doing research on society as a whole that man, there was an article about the choice of red and blue flashing at high pulse rates, like on a vehicle, a police vehicle,
Yeah,
has some sort of effect on a mind.
red is a color that stimulates quite a lot. This is why the bulls usually in the they tend to, it is said, I don't know if it's an urban legend or not, they tend to attack red because it annoys them and it stimulates them so much, while blue is a calming color. You see it in hotels, you see it in like in hospitals. There's a lot of blue and white, of course, but it's more of a calming color. Nobody really paints their wall red unless they want to drive
I have
themselves
red walls right
insane.
now.
Oh, I know.
Eddie, I hate to contradict you. The bulls are actually attracted to the motion of the.
Yeah, that's what I thought. But there's an urban
rather than
legend
the color.
that said that bulls attack red. So I wasn't sure about that, and I'm perfectly fine with that correction.
Yeah, of course. There's the woman in red. Of course, is a very poignant part in the whole film, particularly when he's when Morpheus is talking to Neo about the inertness of people in the Matrix, and there's this very keen scene with this woman in this red dress, and of course, women who wear red become very noticeable, particularly to men. Mm-hmm. So it's an interesting part of the whole.
It's kind of what you want to present yourself as when you want to stand out in a crowd. That's, I think, interesting. But I think in general, this decision is it can be applied to a lot of things that some deeply rooted moral contradictions that we face: religion, patriotism, and just to go back to the childhood idea, I think that when we're presented with these contradictions as a child, we can either believe that we're bad because we don't believe the same things other people do, which would be like taking the blue pill, or we can believe that we're being lied to by the people around us. And so taking the red pill is an experience of extreme pain, and we see that in the movie that Neo has to go through that.
Right, but the benefit of going through the pain or no, of taking the red pill is you've got presumably this power or control over your environment and self that you didn't before, that knowing the nature of the system would grant you.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's how I feel since I quote unquote took the red pill many years ago, which is I think the point that Patrick was making is since the Matrix was released to the public mind, this guy, this black guy holding out his hands with a red and a blue pill in one, and each hand is this symbol of, this is the choice, this is the dichotomy you face. You've either got to resist or you've either got to be passive, And like Addy was saying earlier, it's, where's the finer areas, the grayer areas where do I always have to choose to be an aggressive resistor versus a passive docile follower, or can I kind of do something in between? There's always and it's a movie for media and entertainment, to get a point across. I get that, but yeah, it's that red pill, blue pill thing has become so pervasive, and even using the mental construct of the Matrix itself to describe the world we live in a negative way has become very pervasive too, like I was saying before.
But I think it is true that that once you have knowledge, you really can't go back. Even though
believe me, I tried. It does work.
Yeah. So I think that's where it's compelling, is because and apt, because you're given this choice, and whatever warnings or disclaimers you're given, it's your choice, and you have to take the responsibility of
and
knowing.
You've got a greater responsibility, like you were saying too, because if Neo is indeed this Ubermensch, this digital Ubermensch, he's got like this responsibility because of this power, and it's just like, but to me, I mean, I get the challenge in facing the machine that it is, but as far as I'm concerned, like Jeff brought up in the beginning of the call, the protagonists, the quote-unquote resistors in the movie, they're just as dismissive about human life as the machines are. The machines are dismissive of human life in the sense that there are resource nodes to be tapped and discarded, and the resistance is dismissive because they see anyone that's unplugged as an enemy to also be discarded or used as they see fit. And both sides are talking about this greater good type of thing,
Right. I think this sort of goes into a really interesting part, because there's a character in the film which we kind of were discussing a little bit on the Facebook group during the week, with Cypher, and he was Jeff made a very interesting point about Cypher's not wanting to basically go back and wanted to forget everything when he
ignorance is bliss.
Ignorance is bliss.
It's fantastic.
Yeah, and I think there's an interesting part to that I think Jeff can perhaps allude us on, but it was an interesting bit.
Right, yeah. Pat brought up some parallels between Cypher and Judas, and I just noted that one of the key differences was that sure, when he goes back into the Matrix, he's asked to have money and power. Of course, I'm sure you all notice also he was being addressed as Mr. Reagan, and wants to be an actor when he goes back into the Matrix.
Really?
Yeah.
I gotta watch it again because I didn't.
Yeah, you don't remember during the dinner he says, "I don't want to be rich. I want to be famous. Maybe an actor."
Yeah, an actor. Oh, and his last name was Reagan. The Cypher.
Yeah, his
Holy
Matrix
shit.
alter ego is
That's
Mr.
funny.
Reagan. Yeah, but I mean, along with the money and the social status, his key desire is to have his memory wiped. The first thing he says is, "I don't want to remember nothing." Nothing.
You
You understand?
Me? Nothing. Yeah.
Right,
He was emphasizing that very strongly. He was like, you could see it in his face.
Right,
Do you understand me? Nothing.
Yeah, and I posited that it could be in part, at least, because he doesn't want to suffer any future guilt over the betrayal. And
Right.
After Smith says after Smith confirms that you can bring us Morpheus, you see this expression on Cypher's face that it could be remorse, or it could just be an uncertainty about whether he can really deliver the goods. But it's
I
an
perceived
expression
it as
that you don't.
regret
Yeah.
that you would feel that you know you're doing something wrong, but your perceived self-benefit is greater than not doing the wrong in the first
Right.
place.
And also, Saji, another Babylon 5 reference. It's just like Londo Malari, right? How he's
I love that
disgusted.
guy's hair.
Yeah, he's disgusted seeing the Narn homeworld attacked, but then later on he just powers on through it and jumps on the state bandwagon and dictates the terms of the occupation.
Yeah, and another interesting thing about Cypher, and I'm going to talk about his name again, about names again. His name, Cypher, like in mathematics, Cypher means zero or the absence of quantity. This is also a term used as to define something that has no influence or value. But, however, in cryptography, a cipher is also a term that is used to define a decoding key of a cryptographic system. So in the movie, cipher is actually the key that Agent Smith uses to access the codes to Zion.
Yes, good point.
That's a great point. Yeah, just I wanted to say about Cypher. I'm really glad you brought up that point, Jeff, about him having that slight instant of remorse, because I didn't get that except in that one moment. He's kind of made out to be this punk who we're supposed to hate, right? He's sleazy, and so in general, in movies, I like characters who have some kind of internal conflict. And so I was going to say that Cypher didn't have that, and I thought he was a poor character.
Right, yeah.
But I can appreciate him a little more now that I see that one thing that you pointed out, his expression.
Right. Something else I thought was interesting about Cypher is that mainly he's pissed off about the hierarchy on the ship. He says, all I ever do is what Morpheus tells me to do, and not realizing that when he goes back into the Matrix to be an actor, he's going to have umpteen bosses / handlers, and he's going to have one of the loneliest occupations on the planet.
He won't have to eat the same goddamn goop every day.
Right, yeah.
He goes back in the
he will get his filet mignon.
Right, yeah. What did you want to make a point on, Robin?
Yeah, I was just going to say, like, to me, he's in a way kind of the unsung hero of the movie, actually, because, he's like, even though he quote-unquote betrays Morpheus, I think he's completely right when he says, like, that Morpheus tricked them all kind of into taking the red pill. And, like, because, Morpheus kind of has the Matrix, you can't be told what the Matrix is, yada, yada, yada. But, he could, like, tell people beforehand, like, look, Matrix is this computer program, you're trapped in it, and we're all slaves to machines, and we have this war that's basically unwinnable, and yada, yada, yada. He could have, like, warned the people before the pill.
Yeah, that's true. He could have been a little more forthcoming, and it's kind of selfish of Morpheus, too, because Morpheus knows he needs them to be unplugged to be of any real value to the cause of the resistance. But I gotta have to appreciate with the all-encompassing sensiological nature of the Matrix. If someone had tried to explain that to me while I was still plugged in, I'd be like, okay, but how can you prove it to me? Because it would eventually come back to the point of, fine, prove it to me, and that's where the pill choice comes in, I would assume.
Could have done that by just, like, jumping around from, like, roof to roof.
That's true. That is very true.
I was just thinking that. Show him the look of the
but this secretive nature is the kind of thing that mystics like to surround themselves with, and I can never tell you. I have to show you. Have to feel it. You have to
buy me.
You have to be shown. I can't. It doesn't work that way. So.
Yeah. Well, but yeah, exactly. So, to me, it's kind of like if I'm sticking to my theory here of the false dichotomy. Like, if the movie really portrays one, then they of course have to vilify whoever is pointing out the bullshit on the supposedly good side. I think that's why they might have made him the villain.
Yeah. Plus, Neo is a hacker. He understands software. It would be pretty easy to explain to a hacker that he's living in a program.
Yeah.
But what Morpheus didn't really explain was that he's essentially going to war. I think there are parallels between this and the military, where you're told, oh, you're gonna have all these comrades, and you're gonna, be a patriot, and but he doesn't really tell him what's coming, and so I do think that Robin's right. He's being deceitful in that way.
Interesting. We're kind of coming towards the close, really, on the call, and Ruben really wanted to point out something before we sort of end the call. By the way, guys, great show. I mean, I think we could probably talk about this movie for another couple of hours if we really wanted to, but I just wanted to get Ruben in on the thoughts. He wanted to talk particularly about the idea of self-knowledge, and of course self-knowledge being something Socrates talks about, and of course was reminded in the Oracle's office by Know Thyself. So go ahead, Ruben. Yeah.
Okay, I'll be brief here.
Sure.
I think that was a really important topic that was brought in there by Matthew, and I kind of agree that the movie is actually kind of a metaphor for a journey towards self-knowledge. In terms of philosophy, it's very eclectic. There's a lot of stuff thrown in together. There's a lot of contradictions, and I kind of view this movie as kind of groundbreaking in its genre, in that it is really taking the audience into having very individual experiences. And having kind of a cathartic experience of, becoming enlightened during the movie. It's very engaging for someone to watch a movie like that. Both mystics and philosophers and programmers are drawn in the narrative and feel really compelled. By the story and reach kind of a moment or an illusion of becoming enlightened or having kind of a revolution going on in their heads, taking the red pill, and it's kind of a personal experience of becoming enlightened, which is ultimately vapid, because in the end you walk out of the theater and it turns out you're just going home again.
Yeah.
But it's become a new genre, I think, and there's a couple of examples of movies that have come afterwards. For example, Gravity, which kind of plugs into the same thing. It's hardly a story, Gravity, but you're really compelled to go on this cathartic journey together with Sandra Bullock and become kind of enlightened, to return back to Earth and step out of the lake like another Greek goddess, Venus, and the whole Renaissance
Right.
thing.
Speaking of, just a little interjection here, speaking of movies that have come after Matrix, and Matrix has been an inspiration for them, I would advise our listeners to watch Equilibrium with Christian Bale, which has so many references with the Matrix, and in my opinion, it's like a mix between 1984, The Giver, and The Matrix.
Yeah, no doubt. I thought I was watching The Matrix again at first, with the trench coat and the.
I know. Yeah. It's like a sequel almost. So.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, great thoughts, and I really appreciate them. Adi, you wanted to sort of bring a conclusion to, so go ahead and we'll close the show down. By the way, just a great chat, by the way, guys. Anyway, go ahead, Adi.
Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to wrap up all these thoughts into a little recap and mix with some of my feelings and with whatever we talked about so far. And The Matrix is just an amazing, amazing movie. It represents one of the first milestones in the global awakening that we are undergoing at the moment. It talks about the duality that makes us humans and about our struggle to match, our physical reality in which we live with the world that we create in our own minds. So although the anarchist ideas that the movie promotes are grounded in philosophy, the mysticism aspects of it, which were a little bit annoying to me, are a big turnoff for any rational thinker. But The Matrix does a very good job at planting the idea that the reality that we were thought to see and that we perceive in our minds might not actually be that real. It makes us question and challenge our core beliefs, and it does a very, very good job at it. The odd combination of hardcore philosophical concepts with Greek mythology and Judaic mysticism and also martial arts makes this movie so unique and also so mind-blowing. But the message of The Matrix goes further than nihilism, than solipsism or dualism, and it doesn't just make us wonder about reality itself, but it makes us wonder about the reality of the system under which we live. Change in society and in the physical world is always brought about by ideas. That first, these ideas, they penetrate our minds, and only after they slowly start to materialize into our physical world. The red pill that this movie represents in itself is a pill that many of us have unknowingly swallowed 16 years ago, and only now, looking back, we can see the great impact that it had on our own process of awakening. So personally, even though at the time I couldn't quite grasp the full meaning of its message, today I can see the tremendous role that it played in my own process of mental liberation from the system and from culture. I hope you guys have enjoyed that chat today, and I wanted to thank all callers for sharing their thoughts on this movie with us and with you, the listeners. We will be talking some more about The Matrix, as usual, in our Afterthoughts show next week. But now I'll pass the mic to Patrick, that will talk about some very interesting projects that the Philosophy Film Club has in store for us in March. Pat?
Yeah, thanks, Sadie. And I want just a message to the listeners. I have been looking at the Q&A app, and I know you've been busy telling us stuff, and sorry we didn't get around to really looking at that. I mean, I kind of figured we were going to be a little bit pushed for time, and we have extended the show just because I figured we would talk longer. So apologies for that. It's just but I do acknowledge that you were there and you were talking and making points, and I know some of you wanted to join the show, but yeah, busy. We can't always add everyone, and I added more people than I would normally have done today. So,
and maybe their points will be an inspiration for the Afterthoughts.
Yeah, of course. Well, absolutely. I mean, we will have an Afterthoughts show between me and Adi, and we will pick a caller to join us if they want to join us, and we will do that probably next Saturday or Sunday or next weekend sometime. We'll thrash out the times in the next day or so. But yeah, just to talk a little quickly, just to brief you about the next show. The next show is going to be on High Plains Drifter, which is an old spaghetti western with Clint Eastwood. Some of you may be familiar with obviously the spaghetti western genre, which mostly features Clint Eastwood, of course. The famous film being The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. But we have one of our listeners that wants to particularly take us through this whole movie, so we're going to do a very sort of particularly special edition of the show where it's just going to be basically myself and Adi with John, and John Coleman is his name, and he's one of the members of the group, and he has his own YouTube channel called Freedom Philosophy. So if you want to check that out to hear John's stuff, he's got some pretty good YouTube channel where we actually do feature his channel on this channel. So you can find it there very easily. So we're going to do that, and the other show we're going to do, instead of an Afterthoughts show, because we're not going to have a normal listener call on that particular show, we're going to do the Game of Thrones. Now, I don't know how much interest I have posted a couple of times on the Facebook group, but I'm not sure what the interest is. I'm getting a sort of mixed reaction, but we do plan to have quite a good show, I think, on it if it really interests people. And we got a very one of our listeners is very well versed in the books and the TV series, so we're gonna attempt that. That's gonna be something we'll do on the 28th of March. The show with John on High Plains Drifters will be on the 14th. We may not do a live show for the High Plains Drifters, partly because John is living in Thailand and I live in London, of course, and AD lives in the US, so it's going to be a bit of a problem in terms of time. So that's going to be a recorded show, which we'll release after we've done it. But yeah, I want to thank the callers too. Many thanks for joining, and I know there's plenty to probably plenty more we could talk about this movie till Kingdom Come, literally. But many thanks anyway, and we're going to end the show now. And many thanks for joining, listeners and callers. We'll see you again next month. Bye for now.